Good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to another episode of Cruise Into the Void. My name's Fish, and here's what we got going on tonight. We're going to be talking about warriors of antiquity, how me, an exercise physiologist, would train them if I had modern day tools. So, buckle up and let's get into it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about this. So, we are going to go through a bunch of different warriors at different ages in time. So, they're not all going to be from the exact same time frame. We're going to talk about their weapons. We're going to talk about the standard size of these warriors, how they attacked, how they moved as units, and how I would train them if they had me on the side of the battlefield. Going, Coach Fish, we need to make sure we are in the best shape in order to get things that we got to get done. All right? So, first things first, we're going to go to Scandinavia and talk about the Vikings. So, the Vikings are from the 8th to the 11th century, and specifically, they were roughly about 5'7" to 6 foot ish. Generally, 5'7" to 5'10", I bet is the average guy. But they had some bigger guys, and that's where they kind of berserker style of Viking came from. They were in the Iron Age. So they were primarily using spears, axes, daggers, generally weapons that they got along the way and just kind of fit their attitudes. Let's specifically also include the armor that they were wearing. A lot of them were wearing chainmail or some forms of leather plate mixtures. Also carried it with them was the big round shield and then bows and arrows. Some of them carried bows and arrows. Some of them were just archers. Now, let's also include some other items that they did in daily life. Remember, they rode places. They were known for. Whenever they landed ashore, they always had to chop up logs, make camps, move rocks, do some sort of landscaping to create giant fires and get their boats ashore. And then also with that, these got to be big, burlier people for this particular army. Because they're going to be, one, traveling for long periods of time, and also at the same time, they're going to be exposed to cold. So we don't want like skinny, tiny little athletes. All right, let's talk about their attacks as well. So they would row ashore. Once they got ashore, they would immediately jump out of their boats. Sometimes they would set up camp and start moving around, but generally they would like to attack from the water. So they would row up ashore, jump out, everybody would run and start fighting, and they'd take over everything in about 15 to 30 minutes, depending on the size of the town, how many people they had attacking. Now, with that, the Vikings, you have to think about their weapons. A lot of hacking, chopping, just kind of size and brute style weapons. Not a lot of finesse to them. They can be finesse if trained over time, but what we want is definitely stronger dudes. Think of the NFL linebackers or think NFL linemen. Like, you want professional people moving. Like, that's the type of people that Vikings are. So here's kind of what I'd be doing with them. First of all, their training is always going to be rowing and running. All right, maybe some sort of biking, but more often than not, we're going to do a lot of rowing and running. That's definitely where the majority of our cardio is going to come from. Then after that, let's talk about what we're going to be doing through a lot of body weight movements, but weighted, because you have to remember, chainmail's heavy. A lot of people forget that. Like, chainmail is sometimes upwards of 40 to 50 pounds, depending on how much you have on. Like, if you're covering a full sleeve, or if you're just covering the chest, or just kind of a shoulder plate, depending on what your role was and what you were carrying. So we're either going to do that with vests or rucks, some sort of, and mixed in with body weight stuff. Pull-ups and a light jog somewhere, or a long march. Push-ups mixed in with also carrying heavy sandbags places, a lot of that type of stuff. And then let's talk about the cross-plane movement, all right? So with that, we're moving across the sagittal plane across our body. So we want to do a lot of kettlebell or mace swings. Like we could do that just using our weapons against whatever, hay bales and whatnot, and just chopping down over and over. But one of the biggest things that I want to do with these guys is lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of band work. So with the repeated hacking and chopping motion and repeated rowing motion, we're going to get a lot of strain on those joints. So I want to make sure we're including band work and yoga, at least yoga once a week, and then also doing band work with them specifically on the shoulders and the hips, because that's where probably most of the damage is taken. So what would a typical workout look like? Let's open, if I've only got the guys for like an hour that day, let's say that's what I got. We're going to warm up with a 1,500 meter row total. It's going to be probably a 5 to 1,000 meter warm up with a 500 kind of main set gas tank level. Then head on over, grab your kettlebells for some deadlifts, some heavy deadlifts. Toss up a sandbag carry. And then let's do some mace axe chops or some kettlebell axe chops, depending on what I got with these guys. And we'll circle that a couple times. So we'll do that 1,500 into a 500 main set. 3 rounds of those deadlifts, sandbag carries, and then kettlebell swings. And then once we get done with that, we'll finish up with a little bit of band work. So probably some overhead work, making sure we're doing tricep extensions and I's, T's, and Y's with these guys. Yeah, that's what I would do with them. I think that would be what a typical week would look like for us. And then obviously, depending on the season, right? Like if we're back in town, we would cycle out, so on and so forth. But at that point, we're talking semantics, people. All right, let's move on to the Aztec Eagle Warriors. All right, these are of Mesoamerica, so think all of Mexico down into a little bit of North America, mostly kind of that Inca Maya territory, but they definitely made their way down and through there. The Eagle Aztec Warriors are basically the initial SEAL Team 6, as you. These guys were absolute savages. They were trained from birth to be the warriors of the warriors of the warriors of the warriors of the warriors. You know, like in Men in Black, the best of the best of the best, sir! These type of people. So, because they were all trained in school, and then you were filtered out over time. So obviously all the young kids trained, and then they knew who was super uncoordinated, took them out, started finding other work for them. And then you would cycle your way out throughout the years. So these guys were the motherfuckers. Most of them were probably about, again, 5'7" to 5'10", not very big. I would say the majority of them were on that shorter side of 5'7", so let's give them probably more of a range of 5'5". So you're not dealing with like overly large and burly men. Now, you have to also remember this was Mesoamerica, so more often than not, they were moving by foot. They weren't traveling by horseback as much, especially if they were in the larger units. A smaller unit would probably take horseback through that time frame, but if you had a larger unit of 20 or 30 guys, depending on where they were coming from, sometimes wouldn't have that. So we got to plan for them being able to run. Now, their weapons. They had the macuatl, which is a wooden sword which had obsidian rocks put into it. So this thing was violent, but not overly heavy. Don't think of a big iron sword. Think of more of a wood sword, about, I don't know, 2 to 2.5 feet in length, depending on the warrior and how much obsidian they had access to. They also had the atl, which was the spear thrower. These two were kind of standard issues through everybody. And then they had kind of different versions of the macuatl. It was longer ones, shorter ones that were kind of like little bit more choppy and stabby, but don't think of, again, like iron swords. They weren't big and heavy, or big round shields, right? Like, I forgot and left that out of the soldiers or the Vikings. We need to do lots of shoulder work. Coming back to that. But, and then they also had shields that were either wooden or cowhide. So with this, again, they were trained all the way through school. So a lot of these guys are pretty elite warriors at this point. You're dealing with a big diversity in group. Like, that's one thing to keep in mind, is we're talking about these different elite warriors in history, but a lot of the Vikings were like different just types of farmers or woodsmiths or blacksmiths. Like, these were just the homies getting together, going to take things down, right? Like, there weren't many guys that stayed back in town when they took off. So whereas the Aztec Eagle Warriors, these were your D1 recruits from the jump. Like, these were the kids they were looking at in 8th grade because they were already fully grown and absolutely dominating. So they travel by foot a lot. I want to do a lot of footwork and agility drills, especially with their weapons, right? Think of this versus the Vikings, where if you have a giant iron sword, you can kind of just bully your way through fighting that, especially when you're raiding places that don't have overly heavy guarded places, right? Like, think about that, right? If you're fighting everyday human beings and you only have like 20% of them that know how to fight, it's going to be a pretty easy rundown, especially with bigger guys, because you're going to have numbers with weapons. Whereas the Aztec warriors, these guys have already been bred through the most elite savages of them all. So we're going to work on footwork with them, make sure they've got their footwork together, because with the addle, you kind of got to get a little run into it. Guys, I've seen that throw it well. They kind of get a little hop skip. So we would do some footwork drills, working on their hips. And again, I would do band work on those hips and really get them going. Belt squats would be awesome. Belt marches, we're going to build their legs up because they're going to be doing a lot of running. They're also very they're known for their chaos, right? Like, that's how they fight. So they've got to be athletic humans. So we're going to make their hips real strong so they can handle them jumping, dumping, dipping, dodging left and right, and also make them strong unilaterally as well. They immediately follow up with melee swarming. So a lot of the things that these guys are doing, they're throwing the spears with the addle. They don't have a lot with them. Like, they may have 5 is the standard loadout. After that, they're sprinting in and coming with you. They may even just take that spear and use it as a weapon. So that's crazy too. All right. A standard day for them would probably be a 5K run for a warm-up if I had to train these warriors. 5K run is a warm-up. Then we are going to start things off with a heavy, like a 70% deadlift, but let's make it like 40% band, 30% weight. Like, make them big and explosive. That's a lot of tension, but that's going to make them so quick off the ground. We'll do like 5 rounds of those. 5x3s, or probably 5x... I like 5x3. 5x3 is a good one. Maybe even... call it 7. Call it 7. And then we get into the jump squats right after that. I want to do them into some box jumps. So squat into a box jump. Make them be able to jump high, big, explosive. Then for the addle, instead of like drawing a bow of some sort, let's focus on that throwing power. So similar to like I would train a boxer or a Muay Thai fighter, grab a ball and throw that thing against the wall as hard as you can over and over. Or like grab a smaller med ball, there's a lot of pitching drills that are good for this, where you just whip your shoulder through, throw it back, and you warm up your shoulders and get them all good and ready to go. Like, that's a great routine to work on. Then we would do probably some sprint work, either some straight up sprints, some parachute sprints, banded sprints, sled sprints, some sort of sprint in that aspect. And then to close it out, we would probably do a little bit of balance work, I would say. Put them on a balance board of some sort and have them do some either fighting drills or passing balls or some hand-eye coordination stuff. That's how I would train these guys and turn them into absolute monsters. So that's the Aztec Eagle Warriors. All right, next, let's talk about the Zulu Warriors from South Africa. All right, Shaka Zulu, my friend. And this is what he transformed in battle. He created the buffalo horn formation. So what that is it is a square kind of formation in the center, and then two horns coming out, and they attack from the flanks. So what they do is they attack from the outsides, and then that main one charges in as these guys are coming around. And they absolutely just trap and consume their enemies, which is so cool. These guys were a fast attack unit. They didn't carry anything heavy. They had their ikla, which was their stabbing spear, and their clubs and cowhide shields. With the cowhide shields, that made it a very light shield. So it's a very blowy it's a very parry type of weapon. You're not going to be absorbing a whole lot. So long stabby spear, clubs. We're going to be doing a lot of shoulder band work because those things are going to be moving all the time. You're going to be moving like a boxer. You're going to be stabbing, parry, slip, parry. You know, like it's going to be three stab. Like they're going to have their own rhythm of fighting. So we're going to have to develop that a lot, or at least with their shoulders. So lots of band work with their shoulders. Love seeing that, especially with these guys. Tons of footwork, ladder drills, circle drills, lots of that, lots of hill climbs, so hill sprints. We want to make these guys fast. They're going to be like, with a shock attack unit, you want them to be strong for like 3 to 15 minutes. So we're not going to have big, heavy, long workouts. We're going to do probably one long workout a week. That's going to be an hour, maybe an hour and a half, just so they have longer tanks a little bit. But the main thing is I need them to be strong for 15 to 20 minutes tops. I mean 15 minutes tops. So 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, let's talk about what we're going to be doing. I would have these guys doing a lot of running, a lot of biking, so that we can work on their hips, get their hips nice and strong. So probably doing some sprint work on the bike. That would be something fun for these guys. Then let's work on some deadlifts, especially sumo deadlifts, sumo squats with the, I like them doing them on the safety squat bar. We'll do that. And then we'll do let's do some speed work with doubles on banded banded safety squat bar squats on a box, probably at 24 inches. And then with that, we will put, let's go 20% band and 60% 50. So we're doing 70%. No, I like 80. I like 80%. I like 80% for doubles. So we'll do 60. Speed work with that. You're going to go bop, bop, quick off the box. Hit it, bum, 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 bum. That's it. That's your rhythm. Bum, 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 bum. And then you're getting off. And then you got a 30-second rest. We'll do them with some power and gusto. Get these kids some nice, strong hips. Then we want them to be athletic and strong. So we'll do some sprints on like one of those treadmills that moves only by your own footwork, like one of the curved treadmills. The assault ones, there's a bunch of different ones from Woodward, yada, yada. You guys know which ones I'm talking about. That would be so fun. Then we're going to do some shoulder work with the maces. So some different types of shoulder swings with the maces. And then follow that up with some swings with the kettlebells. Yeah. And then always their warm up for sure. We said is going to be a 5K. Yeah. Their cool down will do 10 minutes of jump rope. 10 minutes of jump rope for everybody's cool down. Love that. All right. Now let's mix it up. We're going to take it over to Eastern Europe. And this is from Jake. Got this one inspired for us from our last podcast. These are the Winged Hussars from Poland. Okay. Some key things to know that's different about these guys. First of all, they're from the 16th to 18th century. So they're most likely wearing steel of some sort. But specifically, let's talk about their lances and the fact that they rode horses. So the fact that they rode horses, I want to build them with much stronger hips, all right? I want to make sure that those hips are so strong so that they can hold on to the horse. Because one of the big things is they're going to have to come in and they're going to have to brace for impact, right? You have to remember these guys are carrying spears. Now, specifically about their spears, they are longer than normal spears. They hollowed them out. A normal spear is going to be about 3 meters in length, which is, think about 9 to 10 feet on who's carrying it and who created it. X, Y, and Z. Everybody had their favorite X, like, y'all know. All right, if you're a runner, you have your favorite style of shoe and you like them just because you like them. So don't worry about it. So the Hussars specifically hollowed out their spears so they could make them longer. So they were the same weight, but they were double the length. So they were 6 meters long. So these guys are carrying close to 20-foot long spears. They're carrying like 18-foot long spears. My God! Imagine carrying a pole that is 18 feet long, and as you're riding your horse, you brace for impact as you crash into that thing, and hopefully it doesn't knock you off the back. Oh my God. These guys have to have some of the strongest backs I've ever seen, and these have to be big, burly dudes, all right? So they had their long lances. They carried around a saber. That's in case they lost their lance. They also had their pistols. Some of them had war hammers. But the biggest thing is that they had their horses and armor. That was one of the biggest things. So as they rode in on these armored horses so they could just wreck people. They fought in numbers of like 200 to 300. And one of the big things is they had wings on their back made from different types of feathers of birds in the area. And they were to scare off the other horses because they basically thought they were monsters. But let's talk about how I would work with these. So specifically, they don't need a lot of cardio. They're riding horses. I need them to be fit enough. So we're going for like an hour bike ride together, mountain biking, not even hard, just cruise control. Maybe we'll go 8 miles, 9 miles, nothing crazy. Keep these guys under control. But where the big efforts is going to come in is when we're working on their explosive power and specifically counter power. So what I mean by that is they have to be bracing for impact. So we have to build them strong in order to brace and be stiff in areas. Think of being able to do a sit-up versus being able to do a plank. Two very different types of strength. Now, let's talk about them a little bit more. We need to build up their hips, so I'm going to probably take them mountain biking. With that, we're then going to do a lot of belt marches. So put a heavy weight, probably a quarter to half of their body weight on a belt hanging under them. They're going to march in place and just march. That's all you're going to do. That's going to get your hips nice and strong. Do a lot of adductor exercises. So think of like ball compression type things. You know, you can do it a couple different ways, but that's the one that's coming to mind for me, is like squeezing a ball between your legs of some sorts. That's what we'd be mixing in for our accessory work. Then let's talk about also how we're going to build their strength. We're going to build this through a lot of heavy shoulder presses, a lot of bench press, a lot of T-bar rows. Bent over rows are probably going to be a lot of big things of our main muscle movers on these guys. Then for our accessory movement, we already talked a little bit about that. We're going to be doing some more rows with kettlebells. We're going to be doing dumbbell rows, shoulder presses, a lot of ISO type of things where we're going to pull it up, give it a 5-second hold, drop it back down so that you can brace for that. Then some sort of game tossing med balls. That's probably what we would do most dynamic. Then obviously some accessory and stretching mixed in. All right, last, let's talk about the Mongols. All right, so these guys were all horse archers, majority of them. So a lot of them came in with their bow tactics. They would come in with sabers, lances, and axes afterwards, but the majority of their tactic was they would ride in on their horses, pop a bunch of arrows, turn around, and as they're riding out, pop a few more arrows. Then the next unit would come in and they would just hit you with wave. They would just hit you with wave after wave after wave after wave after wave after wave, and you couldn't handle it. So here's how they worked. Specifically how I would work with them. Same thing as I would do with the Hussars. I would basically do a lot of belt work, a lot of band work, getting those legs nice and thick and strong. A lot of lunges, walking lunges, a lot of sled pulls. That would probably be a big thing in that routine. Then let's talk about the bows, all right? This is a little bit different. So they were shooting recurve bows at the time. Now, with that, they were short recurve bows that they had to shoot fast. So I would probably put a band, and we would do banded rows, because I would simulate those recurve bows, because unlike the compound bows, it wouldn't lock into place. You would have to pull and hold that tension throughout the whole draw phase. So we would probably do a lot of band work, stretching out those shoulders, and get them on both sides so that you don't develop kind of like a frozen shoulder on your shoulder. That's not something that you want to do. Following that up, these guys were built for speed and momentum. So we're going to be doing a lot of, think of dynamic movements, think of a lot of short form Olympic lifts. So just power cleans, shoulder presses, but like power presses up overhead. Then we're going to have probably some squat cleans built in there. I'd say probably some snatches or power snatches. Maybe if they're more advanced, we'll get them built up all the way. These guys were professional warriors, so we could also see them built up, as in their gym prowess. With those banded pulls, and then I would say probably just a lot of balance ball. So like get them on their knees, balancing on the ball, trying to keep things stable as they either shoot at a target or do those banded draws. And that's how we get them going, man. Like, that's what I would do with these guys. Badasses. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this episode was brought to you by Fisher Fitness Solutions. Go to fisherfitnesssolutions.com if you loved any of this, and talk to me about anything that you want fitness-wise. We offer a lot of different options on that website. Thanks for coming.